Hello guys, how are you?
Hello, Doctor. Fine.
Hello, doctor.
Today we have Luther by John Osborne. But before we start with the play, let's talk first about the movement that John Osborne belongs to, which is the Angry Young Men Theatre. That movement that is known as the Angry Young Men Theatre contained dramatists who started to write in the 50s. I know, Melissa, I'm coming to you. Started in the 50s and the early 60s. And it was a completely, the English theater needed that movement. Why? Because from the beginning of the 20th century till the appearance of the Angry Young Men Theatre, there is no distinctive writing in the English theatre, except for the later plays of Shaw, which were in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, because Shaw died in 1928. And the verse dramas of Eliot. But the verse dramas of Eliot being written in verse, and since Eliot's style is already complicated, so it needed, let's say, an educated audience to interact with. So if we put Eliot aside, and if we put the later plays of Shaw aside in the first 2 decades, beside that, we don't have any kind of distinctive drama writing in the British theatre. So the British theatre was suffering. It was stagnant. It needed new blood. It needed a push to wake it up. That push, that woke it up, came in the shape of the Angry Young Men Theatre. So what's the Angry Young Men Theatre? Melissa, you can start now. Tell us what it is about.
Okay, Doctor, thank you. I would like to add more about the moment, if you allow me.
Yes,
first.
Sure.
The Angry Young Men Theatre firstly coined with the theater of, the play with the, the play with Look Back in Anger. And after its performance, the British drama was regarded as the beginning of the new era, as you said, and it was considered as a revolution in the British theatre because the British theatre renewed itself, and this movement opened new doors to the succeeding generations of the writers, the playwrights. Sorry, and these plays can be considered as a representation of change and reaction to the rapid decline in English theatre after the Second World War. And in that time, the theater companies performed and restaged plays from Chekhov and Ibsen, and also the plays of Shaw, and the Elizabethan theater and over and over. So in 1930s, they had Noel Coward and Terence Rattigan, but they were not new, and the British theater needed young talents. And as you said, they had the worst drama, but it didn't succeed, and it was not efficient enough, because in Europe there was a not a moment, but Europe had the epic theater of Brecht. Brecht.
Yes,
Sorry,
Brecht.
Brecht. And
Yes, Brecht, right.
they had absurd theater.
Bertolt Brecht is a German playwright
Yes.
and director, theater director.
And whereas in USA they had Miller, Williams, and O'Neill, but in British theater, despite this all, but only Osborne had a difference in the British stage, because he was aware of the changes in the theater abroad. That's why many critics regarded his play Look Back in Anger as a turning point of the British theater, as it took its topic from social and political circumstances of its time. Because, besides it mentioned about the lower and or middle class working class characters, and it had realistic settings, and it used everyday language. And we can observe that there's a disillusionment and despair of the nation, of the British nation. And although there were some examples of the middle class drama before Osborne, but only Osborne can only Osborne could give the stage
Osborne.
Osborne, yeah. Only Osborne could give the stage to young people with the with a university degree, which portrayed the middle class realism. So, if we are to give example from the play Look Back in Anger, we can see there is only one room. It's a attic room with the bookshelves, and which is similar to country house drawing room. It is written by the critics. And Osborne used a realist and naturalist setting. He presented the living circumstances of post-war generation. And post-war generation, their circumstances, the working and the lower class people's circumstances, and the characters of the theater struggled with their existence in their attic rooms. Yes, and Osborne deals with the theme of anger, frustration, lack of communication, alienation, and search for compassion or love, and disillusionment, suffering, despair, and self-pity. I would like to talk about why it is called angry, or why this youth is angry. This youth is angry because after the war, we can say they are angry because of the loss of the British Empire. The empire actually didn't lost the war, but empire promised the soldiers wealth, and what the empire promised the young people about
What?
About diminishing the inequality between poor and the rich. And the empire promised about the unemployment, but they didn't do what they promised, and the youth became rebellious as the plays, and actually this plays projected the anger of the working class, because this youth failed to identify themselves in the society. And the young men of the generation wanted an instant change about this. Therefore, they introduced a new character to the theater. Not new, but they introduced an educated male hero that he is unhappy with his situation and who always mourns for the broken promises of the state, the empire, and also they thought that the universe owed him more, and they thought they deserved more and better statues. And before I go with the its characteristics, I would like to mention what Freud thought about that anger. Freud expressed that anger is an emotional state in frustration, aggression. He had frustration, aggression hypothesis, and that is as he considered this as a defense mechanism in order to avoid from self-destruction. So maybe we can say the protagonists of the play are angry to protect their own state of minds, and that is, they show anger violently upon being frustrated. So, and I have some characteristics. Structurally, they use linear plot that concerning the ordinary young man with the financial problems and dissatisfaction of political and social hypocrisy. The tone of the play is highly satiric and realistic. And there is always a conflict between the self and society. They use vulgar language, and it expresses the disturbance from the class distinction. And they use social realism to express their anxiety. And as a style, this movement, as far as I understood, it is also called kitchen sink drama, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, kitchen sink.
And this is a naturalist. They have a naturalistic expressions in the stage. They use totally realistic, and they what do they have? Is they have gas stoves, sinks, chairs, kitchen tables. That's why they called it kitchen sink drama, because they replaced the decors of the theater, the stylish decors and paintings. So the kitchen sink dramatist.
What's wrong with you today, Melissa?
Yeah, I swear I don't know because my mouth is dry. I didn't drink anything. It's empty. Sorry. So
No,
the kitchen sink dramatists employed domestic settings, and the dialogues they had is also naturalistic language. So it uses realistic settings, costumes, colloquial language, and everyday conversation with the audience. And this naturalistic approach to theater, which actually means the photographic approach, they used constructing an illusion of social reality, using the theater as a means. This is using the theatrical means like light, sound, and the acting. And naturalism in the plays aims to reflect the role of the environment determining one's life, using natural life setting, natural daily language, and realistic characters. So to conclude, the characters, to conclude, we can say the first is that the plays deal with the psychology of the character. Thus, there is no action. There are mainly dialogues. And the second, the characters are chaotic, angry, and not satisfied with their lives. And the third, setting is very simple and realistic, and there are no decors or paintings. The fourth, the language is everyday language, so it's naturalistic in setting. And the fifth, it is a domestic drama, and it expresses a social realism. By social realism, I mean the balance between the poor and the rich, some economical and socio-political reasons. And the sixth characteristic is the tone, that which is satiric. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So to summarize all that Melissa said already, because she went into a lot of details, is that the Angry Young Men Theatre is a movement that contains a number of intellectuals who were writing at that time and who were sharing similar features in their writing. Those intellectual writers came mainly from lower classes or working classes. They were the generation, the after-war generation, or the what came when after the Second World War. And we already talked about that and said that Second World War already caused huge damages in Europe, different kind of damages, financial, infrastructural, political, economical, psychological, emotional, on all kinds of levels. These damages had an influence. Okay, so those intellectuals, those young intellectuals, felt that they were frustrated, that they were angry because the government and society did not fulfill its promises by making life better or by making conditions better. Because after when the war finished, that's in 1945, the government promised to help people and help society to build itself again and to offer economical solutions to the destruction of the aftermath of the war. But nothing serious was taken into consideration. Society itself was highly hypocritic. For example, upper class people, rich class people, they tried nothing to help lower classes who were majorly affected by the war aftermath. So those writers, those young writers, were highly frustrated, highly angry because the government and society failed to fulfill its promises. Because they felt that their life is going into meaningless circles. They were living their life on the edge of nothingness. Now, John Osborne, being a person who suffered from poverty at his early life, when he wrote Look Back in Anger, his first successful play, he was struggling with poverty. He could hardly provide for himself and his wife. They were living in a very small and dirty apartment in very, very lower parts of where was he living? Liverpool or Preston, I'm not sure. Anyway, so he put some autobiographical elements in Look Back in Anger. It was supposed to represent him and his generation as people. Actually, they remind me a lot of young people nowadays who feel frustrated because there are no job opportunities. Imagine that they felt the same as you feel about 60 years ago or 70 years ago. It was the same thing, you know, the same feeling. Exactly like young people nowadays when they complain that there are no jobs. So those young writers put what they felt, put the anger and frustration they felt into their works. For Osborne, it was an immediate hit, Look Back in Anger, and established him as the most important newcomer into the world of stage writing. Okay. And the label Angry Young Man, it was actually given by a critic or a magazine, I think, to Osborne. For his play Look Back in Anger, Osborne was described as a young angry man. So this label was given to the movement as a whole. Okay. So what are the features, if we want to summarize it, what are the features of Angry Young Man theater? We usually have a central character who feels frustrated, who feels angry, who feels dismayed, who feels lost. The style is quite realistic. That's why, for example, in Look Back in Anger, it was called kitchen sink drama, because most of the action of the play was in the kitchen among the domestic details. So we have realistic style. We have a straightforward style. It's not complicated, but at the same time, it's loaded with emotions. Since we have frustrated individuals, so naturally we would expect that that those plays, the Angry Young Men theater plays, contain a lot of psychological and emotional turmoil, naturally, since we have frustrated individuals. And you'll see in Luther, and if you, for example, if you are acquainted with other plays, you'll see that we have a lot of emotional and psychological struggle. The concentration is on the psychology and the emotional side of the individual, rather than action itself. Okay. So this can be seen as the main features. Now moving to our play, Luther. When we are talking about an angry generation, frustrated generation in the 50s, we would hardly expect that one of those younger now I'm affected by Melissa. I can't say that correctly. I keep on doing mistakes. I think I'm hungry too, hungry and thirsty. So
Yeah, happy Ramadan.
because last night I could hardly eat anything. I couldn't eat anything.
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
I'm starving. That's why I can hardly put ideas into my mouth. So we can hardly expect a young angry writer to pick up a medieval character to deal with, because Luther, the historic character of Martin Luther, lived I think in 15 something, right? If I'm not mistaken, let me check. 15 something, 16 or 15th century.
16th century.
15th century?
16.
No, 16. 16. He was born late 15th century and died mid 16th century. So to pick up a character who belongs to the 16th century, early 16th century, you may think that it's quite, I mean, it doesn't fit into the spirit, but actually, if there is a character who fits most with the spirit of the angry young man movement, it would be Martin Luther, because Martin Luther, for his time, was quite a rebel. Because, and what he did was like quite massive. He split the church into two halves. One man who could split the church into two halves. Because, you know, I don't know if you checked about Luther's history or who is Martin Luther. Before Luther, there was no such thing as the Protestant church. There was only the Catholic church that ruled Europe. But because of the entire act of rebellion that Luther caused, we had a split of the church from the Catholic to the Protestants, following Luther. Because Luther himself was a Catholic priest. But because he was, he felt frustrated with the practices of the Catholic Church, he decided it's a time for change. So he set all that movement that led eventually to the split of the church between Catholicism and Protestantism. So what is Protestantism? Did any one of you check the historical Martin Luther and what did he do? Or you just read the summary of the play and came to class? Nobody checked him? Wow. Nobody had the slightest curiosity to know who Martin Luther is?
Yes, doctor, I checked him, and he was excommunicated from the church because he was rebellious, and he published many theses, like so much, 95 theses
95
against the
theses.
church. Yes, and he claimed that the religion should be in the how was that said? He thought he believed in the faith, not some practices of the Catholic Church. For example, baptism and what they had, indulgence, letter of indulgence at that time. He was against such practices of the Catholicism. So he that's all I remember now.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, Luther was, as I said, he was a Catholic priest. But then, as he started to observe the practices of the Catholic Church, he believed that those practices are quite and totally wrong. Why? Because what Catholic priests did is that, or what Catholic Church is based on is that they do not encourage people to interact directly with God. They make people believe that they need an intermediate between them and God. This was the first thing that Luther revolted against. He believed that between an individual and God there should be nothing. Only the interaction between the individual and God. But the Catholic Church is based on the idea of intermission. Why? That's how they make people depend on them and need them. Because the Catholic Church, from the day it was built till today, depends on the idea of authority. They should have the authority in everything. They love to have the authority in everything. So to make people depend on them, they kept on telling people that you cannot communicate with God unless you have an intermediate in the middle. Yes, Muhammad, you want to say something?
Yes, Doctor, I am responsible to talk about themes. May I?
Muhammad, you were asleep and woke up or what?
No, Doctor, but I am listening to you as you will finish, and after that I am going to talk.
I'm talking about the historical Martin Luther. What this has to do with themes, Muhammad?
Okay, Doctor, sorry for interrupting you. Okay.
Still not your time. When your time comes, I'll tell you.
Okay, Doctor.
What was I saying? What was I talking about?
You were talking
The
about
authority.
they need interrupt.
The authority of the church.
The authority.
Yeah, they need an intermission, exactly. So the church made people believe that they need an intermediate between them and God, so that they will always depend on church and on priests, so that priests' authority will not be lost or
عمي
weak.
ليش التليفونات اللي اسولف معهم؟
What?
Sorry, doctor, that was me.
Okay. So this was the first thing that Luther felt it's wrong. If you want to talk to God, you do not need an intermediate. Go and talk to God. Okay. By the way, do we have any Christian people here? So that they will not get me wrong. Do we have any Christian student here? No? Okay. Okay. The second thing that really was like the spark that instigated all of Luther's anger and rebellion is the letters of indulgences. I don't know if you have read about that or not, but the letters of indulgences were quite famous during the Middle Ages. The church, the Catholic Church, issued letters of indulgences that said that if you buy a letter of indulgence, then your sins will be forgiven. And that was a disaster, you know, because it means they encouraged sins instead of diminishing sins. Why? Because I would go and kill somebody, and then I say, okay, I'll buy a letter of indulgence and I'll be forgiven. Or I steal from somebody and then I say, it's okay, I buy a letter of indulgence and then I'll be forgiven. So it was a disaster, a real disaster. Because, you know, in any religion, a religion's rule is to encourage people to quit sins, not to commit sins and then buy forgiveness. It was a complete terrible thing to do. So Luther mainly was repulsive against the letters of indulgences and other issues. So he wrote his 95 theses and he nailed them on the church door. By the way, Martin Luther is German. All I'm talking about, the historical Martin Luther, all I'm talking about happened in Germany, not in England. Even in the play that Osborne written, is all the events are in Germany. Nothing is in England. Okay. So he nailed his 95 theses on the church's door, and he challenged any priest to come and defy him and try to convince him that he's wrong. Of course, he had evidence from the Bible. And since the Catholic Church knows very well that Luther is correct, nobody dared to challenge him. The Pope felt offended. He asked the governor of what was the place name where Luther lived? Don't remember. Johannesburg? No, not Johannesburg. Gutenberg. Yeah, exactly. Gutenberg. So the Pope asked the governor of Gutenberg, I think it was Prince something or Duke something, I don't remember. I think it was Prince, to remove the 95 Theses from the church door, but the prince refused, and he said that this is a church issue he's not going to interfere in. So the 95 Theses kept nailed on the church door. Okay. Meanwhile, the poor class in Gutenberg, the peasants, the workers, were suffering from really high taxes. They were starving. So they decided to make a revolution against the political system. So they took Luther's cause as a justification for their revolution. They said, we are going to rebel against the governor, against the authority, because the authority is backed up by the church, and the church itself is corrupt. Why it's corrupt? Because Luther said so and so. So they took Luther's cause as a cover for their revolution. That's why Luther never stood with the peasants' revolution, and he never backed it up. Although he himself revolted against the church, but he never became involved in the peasants' revolution. Okay. But anyway, after what Luther did, the church was split into two parts. And we had the birth of Protestantism. And so Luther can be seen as the instigator, the main cause behind the split of the church. Okay. And the name Protestantism itself comes from protest, you know. He protested. Luther protested against the wrong practices of the Catholic Church. From here comes the title, Protestantism. So now, if we want to know what's the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism, of course there are a lot of differences, but mainly, basically, the basic difference is that in Protestantism, priests do not interfere in the individual's relationship with God. There's no intermission. The church is not tyrannical. Okay. So there is more freedom and more, how would I say it? The Protestant individual is encouraged to look into religion from a personal point of view. This thing you never find it in Catholicism. So more freedom was given to the individual in Protestantism to approach religion, to approach the Bible. And the church is not seen as the center. The Bible is the center, and the individual lies at the center. That's the main difference. And of course, there are many differences. You can look into it if you like. Okay?
Doctor?
Yes.
I have a question. Why he didn't back up the revolution of the poor people, the farmers?
Because as I said, they took his cause as a cover.
I know they took, he gave them the cause. He himself was a revolutionary. Why he didn't back up him?
He was a revolutionary in religion, but not in politics. Politics was not his concern. That's why he didn't take part.
But that leads to the corruption of the church, and the church was corrupted, and the government was corrupt.
well, then people change it, but it's not his job. He's a priest. He doesn't go into politics. Priests are not supposed to be involved in politics or in bloodshed. This is not their job. He made a change. He revolted against the wrong practices. If people want to change authority, let them change it. But he's not part of it because he's a priest. He's a man of God, a man of peace. It's not his job to go through a rebellion. He changed through ideas. That's what he did. But if people want to change through bloodshed and violence, then let people go and do it. But he wasn't part of it. Okay? And I can understand his point of view perfectly. All right? Okay. Now, let's come to the play today. Now we know the background of the real character. We understand now why Osborne will choose to go back like 400 years from his time to pick up a 16th century character, because this 16th century character fits intellectually, individually, psychologically. He fits into the same struggle that those young generation felt in the 20th century. So he picked up the character of Luther to be an example, a prototype. Okay. Now the play itself is divided into 3 acts, and each act, of course, made of certain scenes. And the play concentrates mainly, of course, it doesn't go roughly chronologically. It's episodic. Why? Because Osborne is concentrating on the emotional and psychological and the individual struggle that Luther goes through in the span of his life. The play opens with the moment Luther decides to be a priest, when he tells his father he wants to be a priest, and it ends up with him being middle-aged and having his first a newborn son. So we have a span like of 20 years in between. The play covers like 20 years in between. I don't remember exactly how many years, but it's supposed to cover like many years. So Osborne wanted us to focus on the change in Luther's character from the moment that he was still a young man who knows nothing about the practice of the church, till later on when he's mature and he knows very well where he is standing. It's a journey. It's a journey into self, a journey into identity, a journey into self-discovery. Okay, that's what it's mainly about. Now, I will ask you the question that you are now accustomed to, I guess. I want to ask you, what is your impression about the play? Or if I ask you what this play is about, what would you say?
Yes, Doctor. I think it's about liberating the people from the control of the religion. What's happened is the religion is control on everything. The church is controlling the life of the civilians. This idea has happened in all the ages. Now today we see the religion is control of every Muslim life. It's happened in our society. The church was use the language of Latin language, or I don't know. There's no one can understand that language. Just the priests.
Latin. It was
Hebrew.
No, Latin.
Latin, yes, exactly.
So only educated people could read the Bible. But the majority of people, that's the lower class, they couldn't read the Bible because it's written in Latin.
And
and the church did that on purpose.
Of course.
To form its grasp.
Of course.
On people.
Of course, Doctor. Now today we have the language. Now we have everything, but we have this definition of the religion is different from any other. What I trying to say is the religion is control everything. Luther tried to make a revolution upon these ideas of controlling people, and everyone should take the religion from his personal point of view. His religion with God's will be personal, not with the ideas of the religious men, the monks or.
We need a Luther nowadays, but in Islam, we need a Luther in Islam.
It's different, Doctor. We have all these ideas. We have social media. We directly the people now change. They are fear from everything.
No, they didn't. People. No, they didn't change. From what I see of people nowadays, they are either under the full control of wrong religious ideologies, or they turn into atheism. I haven't seen something in the middle, unfortunately. Especially young people nowadays, young generation nowadays, from what I see on the social media, either they turn into atheism, or they are completely controlled by wrong religious ideologies. And this is something very, very sad. That's why I said we need a Luther for nowadays, you know?
If we put a comparing between our society today and the farmer society who made a revolution against the church, what we need to make this revolution, they were ignorance, but they took some of ideas of.
No, our people nowadays are more ignorant than those farmers. At least those farmers' excuse was that they were not educated. Our people are educated but blind. Let me tell you that. Okay.
So we have no solution today.
We need a Luther, and I keep on saying that. We need a Luther nowadays to correct people's, because people are completely under false and wrong religious ideologies. This is my personal point of view. This is how I see it. When you reach a specific intellectual level in your life, when you are mature enough to look at things wisely and objectively, you will understand what I'm talking about. Now you are young, you may not understand what I'm talking about, but when you'll be mature enough, and if you are intellectual enough, then you will understand what I'm talking about.
Doctor, but we have many Luthers today, but the people do not care about. They don't read anything. They don't read novels or what the people, the educated people write.
You don't need to read novels to know where you stand. You need to have a broader mind. You need to have an understanding of humanity. You need to have a living conscience. That's what you need. Okay, you don't need to read many. Of course, reading books is very important. But what you really need is an open mind, a living conscience, and a good sense of humanity to see what's wrong and what's right. And you don't need anybody to tell you that, by the way. If your conscience is living enough, if it's alive, then it will tell you what's wrong and what's right, because this is something God put into man instinctively, and by man I mean men and women, instinctively, by instinct. You know by instinct what's wrong and what's right, but people blind themselves. Okay? Okay? I believe that God made people clever enough to know instinctively what's right and what's wrong, but people choose to blind themselves, unfortunately. That's the problem. Okay? Yes, Melissa, what did you want to say?
Yes, I was going to say the youth is not blind, maybe, but maybe the youth is covered. They don't have courage to reject the authority. Maybe that's why. Maybe they are not intellectuals, but not intellectual, but maybe they are afraid. So am I, by the way. I'm talking from myself. Maybe we are cowards that we don't reject the authority we have. That could be any constitution or institution, but at the end you will be solitized. You will be alone. You will be isolated from the society if you speak of your mind, because we are not Luthers, and we will be homeless at the end, and we will be rejected by even our from our even families, and we will be homeless. What I mean is waterless.
Well, Melissa,
At the end they will declare you as a terrorist, and you will have to go away from your country, and that's how it is now.
well,
We are cowards.
no, it's not a matter of coward, but Melissa, all changes need sacrifices. No change comes from air. When people will understand that they need to do sacrifices to have change, only then they can change. Okay?
I disagree with you.
And I hope we will not all end up in jail tonight after this lecture, because I have this feeling.
I didn't give any names, sorry. I didn't give any names.
Hopefully we'll not end up in jail. I'm hungry. I can't end up in jail today. But to end up the dispute, no change come without sacrifices. Luther knew that he may sacrifice his life. He was standing alone. He was standing in the face of the most powerful religious institution of his time. A lonely person, one man, stood in the face of the Catholic Church. Imagine that. And the Catholic Church was, at his time, the Catholic Church was governing Europe. But he wasn't afraid to speak his mind. He said, I'm going to say it, and to hell, with everything else. So yeah, when you reach that level of understanding, when you reach that level, when you embrace humanity to the utmost, then you will not be afraid to do some sacrifices. Okay, that's what Luther did. He wasn't afraid anymore. He crossed all the lines, right? Okay. Now, again, into my question. What do you think this play is about? Now, Murtada said it's about challenging religion and changing people's ideas. Okay, what else? What do you think?
Yes, Doctor. Simply answer, it is about the religious struggle. Why is the religious struggle? Because most of people do not know which religious they are being to. One of them is we have Luther. Actually, he has a struggle with himself. Is there a good religion or not? And at the same time, he conflicts with himself between his devil and God. Maybe God save me or not. Or he always has struggled with the devil. I think that at the same time, in addition, people in that, I mean the church, they are killing one another because this religious struggle, and this is maybe we can call it a religious crisis.
Church killing each other?
No, people. I think.
When? Where? Where people are killing each other?
In the play, actually.
No, nobody's killing nobody. We had the peasants revolt.
I don't know, but I watched a movie of the play actually with her, and I see how people are underdog, and they are killing.
No, they were not killing each other. The peasants had a revolt against the political government.
Mm-hmm.
So it's natural that there will be a clash between the peasants and the political government. So this party kills that party. But people are not killing each other, no.
Okay, maybe the reason is going back to the religious crisis between these
Well,
struggles.
actually, Mohammed, okay, let me interrupt you. The play is not about religion. The play is about the psychological and emotional struggle inside Luther himself. Osborne was not interested in religion at all. You know, most of the generation after Second World War fell into atheism. Okay? So Osborne was not at least interested in the matter of religion. 90% he was an atheist.
Okay, Doctor, please, if is it not about religious, why there are barriers like Christianity and Catholic?
Of course, because we are dealing with a historical character.
Historical. Oh.
We are dealing not with a fictional character. We are dealing with a historical character. So Osborne has to choose some historical facts and work on them. But his interest was not in religion.
Maybe, Doctor, you mean not the religion itself, but the capitalism.
Let me explain to you. Don't get, and this is for all of you guys, don't get it wrong. Osborne was never interested in religion. His focus was on Luther. And since Luther is a historical character, he had to choose some historical moments, events, to put Luther in. And he was a priest, so definitely he has to mention that. But he had not the least interest of the religious question. Osborne has nothing to do with that. All his focus is on the question of individual revolt or rebellion, individual frustration, individual anger, the psychological turmoil inside Luther, the emotional turmoil inside Luther. That's all his focus was on. He had nothing to do with the religious matter. That's why we have no comment whatsoever from the writer on the religious matter. No, he was not interested in that.
So Doctor, excuse me. So what is the reason behind these relations? You mentioned it.
Which relations?
Relation like psychological and so on. These problems are psychological. We are dealing with psychological problem, historical problem. So I am asking you, what is the reason actually? What is the reason?
The reason is that we have, like and I said from the beginning. I said it from the very beginning. You are making me tired. I said it from the very beginning. Luther, the historical Luther, is Osborne felt that he is much like those young angry men like Osborne and his friends or his generation.
Okay, I guess.
Osborne felt that Luther is the prototype for his generation, because Luther, like Osborne and like his generation, felt that he was struggling alone, that he was having so much revolutionary ideas on his own. And I told you, he was one man that challenged entire Catholicism. So he's like an example, an idol, a godfather, a prototype for Osborne and his generation. He took him as an example to tell that, why? To tell people that's how we feel, that's how we young people feel nowadays, exactly like how Luther felt in his own days. He felt that he was quite alone, abandoned, at loss, confused, frustrated, dissatisfied, and he was going through the battle all by himself. That's exactly how Osborne and his generation felt. Okay, it has nothing to do with religion. Osborne is not interested the least in the matter of religion. Religion and the other details are there because they are historical facts, not because Osborne is interested in them, not the least. Okay, but he was interested in the prototype, in the example, in the idol, Luther. That's why the play is called Luther. We are concentrating on Luther. We don't care about other details. But we are interested to see how Luther feels, how he thinks, how he reacts, what does he do. That's what our focus is on. Okay? All right. We've passed more than an hour. Wow. Okay, now Mohammed, tell us about the most important themes because we are not don't have much time.
I submitted 3 important themes. The first one is loss of faith. First of all, Luther is represented the Protestant Reformation, as you said in the first part of the lecture. He is following the practices and teaching of the church. Actually, he has a personal struggle with himself. Like, for example, in teaching or writing his, I think that 1905 thesis, he has become the first Protestant for those people, actually. So in his writing thesis about the Roman Catholic doctrine, he refuses the church leaders, I mean the guiders or headers of the church. And this will be taken as to say that Luther is uncertain in that faith, or he does not actual, which is a correct faith, he will doubt. So he is certain of his action, moves, reaction, but that faith is not actually. Eventually, he reveals to the spiritual father, his name is Stupitz, that waited to answer such a question.
Staupitz. He's
Staupitz.
German. He's German, yeah. Staupitz.
It's German. I am not associated with this name, sorry. Okay. To answer such a question, that he was not sure with them, like I listened to God's choice, but all could hear was my own. Another question is Luther was, for example, I rely on no man, only on you. He says also that my God, do you hear me? I think that it is suffering and a struggle with himself. He really needs a God or a man that be facilitated him. Another question, no, you can't die. You can't die, only hide yourself, can't you? This is a type of monologue that Luther is talking with God himself. Actually, we see that Luther is definitely associated with God in order to help and save him. But at the end of the play, we note that Luther demonstrates less doubt his relationship with God. Actually, this story is sharing with the Isaac and Abraham's. This story. This is a relationship between Abraham and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he focuses on the obedience to God as he shows that there is no power, only God or bad God. Finally, the question is if Luther really has a certain beliefs of that faith, he would never rebel against the church and its practice and leaders. This is number one, Doctor. This is the first thing I do it. The second is the relationship between father and son. Here we have three fathers for adopting Luther. The first one, the original father, is Han, which name is Han. He wanted his son, he wanted Luther. Hans, yes, Hans. He wanted his son Luther to become a lawyer, not a priest, or a profession that takes him away from the material world. The second one is a spiritual father. A spiritual father is God, actually. Luther entreats God to be a guidance, let us say, to him. He envisions himself as a lost child. More than this, he needs God to be guided him. For example, he contemplates to God as, God, give me life, oh Lord, give me life, breathe to me, and so on. But once again, he rebels against God. And this is a double issue in which the first is love of God, and second, he rebels against God, actually. The third father is Stobitz, actually. He exists as a father of Luther and trying to set Luther on a clear and easier path, let's say. In addition, he tries to facilitate him. Even more than this, Luther asked him, are you pleased with me? I think that Luther, in this point, he is not as certain if this father will be pleased with him. I don't know. We can't say that Luther indeed wants someone to help him or to be a guidance in the process of life itself, but he is still uncertain with all kind of that faith. Doctor, this is the second I finished. The third theme is resistance authority. You are already talked about. Luther resists against the authority of his father. That's one. The leaders of church with punishment. So the church leaders are imitated the beliefs and values of the Pope. I think that this story, as this imitation, it is his heritage, his Luther's heritage, and it is forbidden that a man neglects it, because, we see how Luther has ridiculed that authorities in order to set himself as the only authority capable of determining his relationship to God. In addition, he challenged people in the church that deal with God through the mediation of a priest. Next one, in the scene of a protest, he is only a man that dares to protest against the idea of a priest, because anyone else is too filled with terror at the Pope's reaction as a punishment, I mean here. And at the same time, Luther tries to protect the glory of Christianity. He is only a one that can be stood up and defend God and his purity. And this is, you mentioned already, Doctor, that Luther do not want a man between him and God. He wants a special issue, and which this issue is taken as that there is no one between man and God, only God and man. And this is what Luther has spoken about. That's all, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. As I said, the main issues that we are supposed to focus on in the play is the character of Luther himself, because we have a very minute study of the character of Luther. And of course, Osborne, to show you the kind of psychological and emotional turmoil that Luther was going through, he connected that to his physical condition. Because throughout the play, we have the image of constipation. Luther always suffers from constipation, which can be very, very irritating. This physical constipation is a simulator to his intellectual constipation. The ideas that he was trying to pump into the world could hardly and difficultly reach to people. It wasn't that easy because people at his times were still not ready, because we said majority of people were not educated. So they were not ready to embrace. That's why, by the way, and again, one of the reasons why he did not back up the peasants' revolution. The peasants took his cause as a cover, but they did not really understand what he was trying to do. They just took it as a cover to change the government. But they were not really understanding what he was trying to do or what he was trying to change. Because people were not yet intellectually ready to understand what he wanted to do. And the change did not come in one day, by the way. The change and the split of the church did not come in one day. It took like 20 years till he was in his middle ages. So when I told you, I mean, when you said why he didn't back up the peasants' revolution, the changes that he was looking for were intellectual changes, were spiritual changes, were changes that depended on your on how conscious you are about the world around you. People were not yet ready. Do you see? So the change to the church did not come in one day. It took a long time to happen. That's another reason why he wasn't in the favor of the peasants' revolution. Because he was preoccupied with more focal issues. He was dealing with the spiritual tie between man and God, while people in his time could hardly understand that there is a spiritual tie between man and God, because all their dependence was on the church. The church did all that instead of them. The church thought on their behalf, the church felt on their behalf, the church talked on their behalf. They did nothing. There was no such thing as an immediate spiritual tie between man and God. That's exactly what Luther wanted to establish. All right? Okay, what else? Whom did I ask to talk about style? Who is supposed to talk about style?
I think it was Omar.
Yes,
Let me check. Who is supposed to talk about style?
Can you hear me, Doctor?
What?
Can you hear me?
Yes, who's that?
Omar.
You are responsible for style?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna start by talking about social realism. It's a style of art, literature, and film and TV.
Social what?
Social realism.
Realism. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a style of art, literature, and film and TV. It depicts the lives of workers and the poor on a regular basis. Artists who work on in social realism attempt to depict characters and their lives in a realistic manner. This means that they often show elements that are not desirable or attractive, uh, because they can depict people who are old, ill, depressed, psychotic, or disabled. This is not to say that a realist piece of art or literature is unattractive. It can be made glamorous by the artist or the writer's style of creation. Luther was both a departure from and an expansion of familiar themes for Osborne. The move from contemporary middle-class England to 16th century Germany makes Luther seem an anomalous experiment. But Osborne was once again concerned with the psychology of sensitive man who prefers to escape the world rather than cope with the burden of mammoth causes that he finds overwhelming. Osborne wrote what he knew, the plight of being young, educated and filled with contempt for the disappointing results of welfare reform, unfair class structure, and living in the harsh aftermath of World War II, while being too young to have participated in it. He expressed his anger towards his mother, wives, and even children in his writing. He voiced his complaints through his characters, but but does not propose any solution for these frustrations. Osborne's plays were still divisive, and the government banned many of them, ordering scenes to be cut and closing down some productions completely. So the social realism characteristics are artwork that gives accurate portrayal of the scene and characters without embellishments, artwork that points of political and economic corruption, artwork that shows how the poor are living, artwork that shows flaws in human nature, and artwork that portrays nature as powerful and cool. That's all I have to.
So the only side you covered is social realism?
Yes, I have some critics agree that Luther aimed at being an epic drama, since theater is a form of drama that presents a series of loosely connected scenes and often a narrator, a figure who will address the audience with analysis or argument.
Yes, epic drama of Brecht. Melissa mentioned Brecht earlierly. Because Brecht has a huge influence on the European theater. He established the epic drama, and there are a lot of features we don't have time now to cover, but you can check for yourselves. Okay, so as your colleague mentioned, and as I said that earlier, we have realistic dealing in the play, okay? Because, as I said, the concentration is not on the techniques as much as they are on the themes or on the ideas that Osborne is trying to communicate to you. Those ideas are what? Those ideas that are an individual person must reach a specific intellectual level, a specific level of awareness to be able to dissociate himself from his conventional society. That's exactly what Osborne and his generation felt. They felt that they were dissociated from society, disconnected from society, because society was somehow conventional, belonging to a different time, having different ideologies and different beliefs than those young generation who embraced a completely different lifestyle. Okay, so like Luther himself, he was dissociated from his society in his days. He was disconnected from his family. He was disconnected from church. He was standing all by himself, simply because he reached that level of awareness that made him unable to deal with conventional ideas and conventional people anymore. That's how Osborne and his generation felt. They felt they were no more able to communicate with their society because they reached an awareness that opened their eyes to the reality of existence. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Of course, there are a lot of things to talk about. I mean, if we go into the play itself, we may need 3 lectures, but that's all we have. So we have to summarize the most important ideas that Osborne is trying to communicating to you. Okay. Do you have any questions or anything you'd like to add?
Yes, doctor. can we say that one of the aspects that the player reflects is that the religion and the politics never and ever go hand by hand. If they are interfere with each other, then we got a disaster as we got in our country these days.
On the contrary, religion and politics always go hand in hand, Yusuf. It's completely the opposite of what you say. Politics, governments always depend on corrupt religious men to back them up and to make people follow them. Or how would they follow? Or how would people be blinded? It's completely the opposite of what you said. From the farthest moment of history, politics, governments always depend on the backup of corrupted religious persons to let them go on. Okay?
Okay. Yes, Doctor?
Mm.
May I add something? I think the ideas of Luther made a big change. These ideas reshaped Europe. There is a kings and kingdom adopt these ideas, and they thought they will be free from the control of the Christianity of the Pope himself. As we know, the Pope was the highest authority on Europe. He was controlling. He make invasions on other lands from all Europe and controlled all the armies. So what they made, the kings, when they get the ideas of Luther, they started to think if we can be believers, we have a personal relation with God, so we don't need this authority upon us. So they depended from the authority of the church, and they became independent. So we saw this, the reshaping of Europe became dependent kingdoms out of the hand of the Pope. I think that's coming from the ideas of Luther.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions before we finish?
No, thank you, Doctor. Everything is clear.
Okay. So if you don't have more questions, this will be all for today's lecture. Okay.
Have a nice day, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, welcome, and see you next week if we are not going to jail tonight.